Welcome to UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis. Where every day I aim to bring you the latest UFO reports and other fascinating stories from around the globe. Today is Friday, January 19th, 2018. On Fridays at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, join me on my talk show, The Outlander, where I answer your emails, take your calls, and interview some intriguing guests. Just go to irnchat.com to interact and listen live to The Outlander Show. Blasting off with some very cool UFO reports. We always find some good ones, don't we? All right, this UFO sighting comes to us from Cornwall, Ontario. This is a slight blast from the past. This occurred June 16th, 2016. In brief, the witness states object captured in view of moon. Seems like a lot of people do that. They do find oddities around our moon. In more detail, the witness states, I was shooting images with my kids on the side of the house. Great. In more detail, the witness states, I was shooting images with my kids on the side of my house, just randomly shooting the moon and clouds. I captured the day's images using a Canon SX60HS, which has zoom capabilities, allowing you to zoom in on the moon's craters. Oh, that's funky. I did not notice the object while shooting. In this particular moment, I was using a 3-shot burst and just trying to get the circumference of the moon. It was only when I was going through the day's images I noticed what seemed to be a mark on my monitor screen. After trying to remove it the old-fashioned way by licking my finger and scrubbing it off, I realized it was in the image. And I blew it up only to notice an object in view of the moon. The object seems to resemble a hat shape, likely metallic, and what I would call a disc with an elevated dome of sorts. It does not look to have many attachments at all. I was immediately shocked by what I had captured. However, with my kids there, I asked them, "What do you think this is?" They all respectively said they thought it was a UFO or spacecraft. Out of the mouth of babes. I am unaware whether it could be military, dimensional, otherworldly. My only certainty is that I have never witnessed anything like it. Unfortunately, this was a still image. However, there was no object in the 2 subsequent images, meaning it was either faster than the shutter speed on 3 bursts, or it was there and gone. Disappeared. Not sure. I was utterly afraid to report this object. I did not want to be the subject of ridicule. I did post it on my Facebook page and shared it with some friends and family, who have all encouraged me to report the sighting and get my story out there. My children, who were reviewing the images with me, all witnessed the finding. There were 5 of us in total, the kids, aged 8 to 12, and myself. So, with that said, here's my sighting. I appreciate any feedback as to what it is I witnessed that day. That's pretty funky. I like that kind of stuff. I dig it. I dig it. And bravo for stepping forward. All right, this next UFO report. Oh, another slight blast from the past. It's not that far back. UFO sighting in Marion, Virginia. This occurred January 10th, 2015. Army Osprey following orbs that change direction fast and at 90-degree angle. In more detail, the witness states, I was inside the house and heard loud aircraft, went outside, and saw 3 of the 4 Ospreys, rotors in helicopter position, that flew over from north to south. About 15 minutes later, I heard them coming back from south to north. 3 passed over the house. The 4th made a fairly quick bank and turned around and headed south. I had my one son come with me and jumped in the car to see where it was going. I love it. By the time we got in the car and went over the hill, the Osprey was coming back north a couple hundred yards in front of us at about 400 to 500 feet altitude. We saw a tiny, bright white light in front of the Osprey. As it passed over us, there were two lights, and one darted west at a 90-degree angle, and one went out of sight. The other went east a second or so after the first one, and the second one darted east, and the Osprey went in that direction over the ridge and out of sight. The Ospreys flew over this area all the time, but it is very rare they do so after dark. I figured this was something they, the Army, have or use, but the speed and physics were pretty fast compared to today's drones, especially in 2015. Don't. All right, the next UFO sighting. This occurred in North Carolina. January 1st, 2018. Red, orange, candle flame shaped objects flying south from the north up to 30. In more detail, the witness states, it was the 2018 New Year, and my neighbor and I were in the backyard enjoying a fire when I noticed a couple of these orange objects in the sky. I had not been drinking, for the record. I always get a kick out of that. I first noticed that they were not blinking like aviation lights. We live in the city and are constantly having air traffic in our area. Yet there seemed to be a lack of it in this time frame. They looked like orange-red candle flames traveling from the north to south. They kept coming one after another. It looked like a huge ship was passing by at a low altitude. All of the lights seemed to travel at the same speed and distance from each other, not passing or deviating from the path. The only thing that seemed to differ some were the altitudes of the objects, but not by that much. Excited, I called my wife to come and see these objects. We now had 3 people observing this. This lasted about 20 to 25 minutes. It was from about 12:15 to 12:40 a.m. Well, hey, aliens got to bring in the new year. Come on now. The sky was overcast, but I could see fireworks coming from Freedom Park area, which is maybe 2 or 3 blocks away. So it seemed that there was a low ceiling of visibility, lending me to believe that these objects were definitely under the radar. We realized that there were so many that we should start counting. We both determined that 3 were at least 25 to 30. I have now witnessed 3 events. The first was a pulsating violet-blue orb around Crowder's Mountain, North Carolina, in which I was in awe. And then a few years later, a white orb and TR-3B in Dallas, North Carolina, which made me and my ex-wife feel fear. And we ran and hid. Whoa, really? Wow. These were both in the 90s. This event, I didn't feel anything but awe. I think most of what I have seen was experimental military crafts, in my opinion. North Carolina is home to Fort Bragg, Pope Air Force Base, as well as Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point. I took some pics on my Verizon Revere Flip dumb phone. It's funny. A total of 4 pics for such a crappy phone. It picked up a white sphere and also the orange flame, but when it took, it seemed to look like some other image of craft that I have seen on the web. I will try to upload these later. Well, alrighty then. This next UFO sighting. This occurred in Marblehead, Massachusetts. Don't you wonder where these names come from? I mean, were they insulting somebody and the name just stuck? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. All right, moving on. June 20th, 2016. In brief, the witness states, I was driving and saw 2 lights ahead, hovering. Just above the tree line, there appeared to be light coming from it, like a helicopter beam. But that light wasn't there once I got close to it. Okay, in more detail, the witness states, I waited a long time to submit this because I have had trouble describing what I saw and have been looking for reports of anything similar. I came across MUFON case 75504 and finally saw an object, an experience that was like my own. I also had another experience a few months later in September, which has video but a completely different type of object or objects. Anyway, on June 20th, 2016, I was driving home from Vinnon Square down Tuskegee Street into Marblehead, Tedesco, in a long, straight road. The first intersection is a four-way stop. It's visible from a decent distance on Tedesco. Driving toward it, I noticed two lights, very bright, hovering not too far above the tree line. I also thought I saw light coming from the object and assumed it was a helicopter. I wondered what was going on, what had happened. I expected some sort of movement, even hovering. Helicopters tend to waver, as do their lights, but it held steady. There is an elementary school on the corner, and I was also expecting that it might move to land there, or that another would appear and land. It was a very quiet night. There was no one else on the road this whole time. I was coming up on the intersection, waiting for some sign of anything, and it still just wasn't moving at all. I had deliberately slowed down to watch and to try catch the red light. There was no one behind me, so I went very slowly and let it turn red. And still the object just sat there. I swear to you, I don't know why, but I 100% felt it knew I was looking at it. You know, that's common. That's very common. Do you know they respond too? That's pretty kind of funky too. And it was looking at me. Oh, heck. We sat like that for about 10 seconds, and then it started moving towards me. I rolled my window the rest of the way down and at the same time was detaching my phone and turning off the music because I felt I needed to pay attention. Still, intellectually, I guess, I was sort of expecting that with the window wide open and the music off, I'd hear a sound of a helicopter and see the wind generated by one, but there was nothing. It was noiseless. No wind. It had gotten a little lower in those 2 seconds or so and was just beyond the intersection. It got almost right in front of me, then smoothly veered to the right, up Maple Street, diagonally, as if heading toward Salem or out to sea, and was gone from sight. The lights in the intersection and on the vehicle turned it into a fuzzy silhouette. It looked like it had corners and curves. There were more lights on it, but I didn't see the beam like light anymore. I wasn't sure I had seen it at all. I wrote 2 Facebook posts about it right after. Now that took you 2 years to report that? Okay. You know, it's so wild to me because people feel like I need validation that somebody else has witnessed something like this, so I'm just going to wait 1 year, 2 year. I mean, wow. Just speak your story. We've got to get these things out there, so why not? Just share away. You're among friends. All right. The next UFO sighting. This occurred in Las Vegas, Nevada. This occurred January 7th, 2018. In brief, multiple shiny objects, mostly spheres, and some pill-looking ones. In more detail, I was standing on sidewalk of Frank Sinatra Drive. That's funny. Facing south when I noticed a plane from the southwest giving a chemtrail that was thicker and whiter than usual. I followed it until it was just right above me when I noticed what appeared to look like a bunch of balloons above the plane's path. After focusing more on the, quote, balloons, I realized that they were very shiny, metallic layer on them, and they were perfect spheres, and that they were the same size of the plane flying by them with the chemtrail, but higher up. The objects were in a mass group with the spheres in the front and pill-like objects towards the rear. The plane with the trail was traveling northeast.
Attention shoppers, clean up on aisle 14. Clean up on aisle 14. Someone dropped a jar of pickles. Pickles. Kosher pickles.
Beatboxing at a big box store. Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
A red minivan has the lights on in the parking lot.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Geico.
While the objects were in perfect line with the plane's trail, traveling southwest as if to cover the objects. As this was happening, there was another plane below the plane with the trail and the objects, traveling a high rate of speed towards the southwest, appeared to look like a fighter jet. About 2 minutes after watching this, a Black Hawk, wow, the sky is getting crowded in this story. A Black Hawk helicopter flew right overhead, maybe about 100 feet above ground, moving very fast, heading north. I was overwhelmed at the time, but managed to capture some photos. I should take looks at these photos, shouldn't I, while I'm doing all this? It'd be just too distracting. Okay, the next UFO sighting happened in Capone Bridge, West Virginia. This occurred January 13th, 2018. I am so bad at pronouncing things. It's all good. We're just having some fun here. It's just me and you. 4 lights that emitted material from them. In more detail, the witness states, "My wife and I saw 4 bright glowing lights that we thought were airplanes from Martinsburg Air Base or some other airplanes. We observed the lights right above the trees in the direction of Slanesville. The lights were very bright and did not move or blink and dropped some sort of bright material from them. The lights pulsated from a yellow to white blue color. After the lights dropped material, they remained in the area for another 2 minutes and then flew off at an extremely high rate of speed in the direction of Slanesville. On the 14th, we drove up to the area where we thought the lights were hovering above and found some metallic drops that looked like soldering. Oh, that's wild. The side of one tree had a thin burn mark and the material lying at the base of the tree. We did take a couple of soil samples and scraped bark off some of the trees. Did you get some of the metal? Where are you sending that? That's pretty funky. That's cool. That's a cool one. All right. The next UFO sighting. This occurred in Berneau, Idaho. This occurred on January 14th, 2017. Object emitting bright light high up in the atmosphere that changed directions and quickly disappeared from sight. In more detail, I was walking home. It was towards the end of dusk when I noticed a bright white light moving across the sky at a high altitude, heading northeast, climbing from about 60 degrees, climbing towards 70 degrees. I thought it was the International Space Station until the lights went from pulsating to blinking as it broke from the path before a brief absence before the object flickered, coming back into view briefly down 55 degrees, heading southeast as it appeared to rapidly accelerate out of sight. The overall appearance of the light appeared almost as if emitted from the object's drive, and the various phases appeared to correlate with the change of speed and direction. I live beneath the flight path of Mountain Home Air Force Base and have seen every sort of aircraft they could fly, including Project Aurora, and this wasn't like anything I have seen. Alrighty. The next UFO sighting. This occurred in Medford, Oregon. This happened January 13th, 2018. In brief, the witness states, I saw an orange orb. Suddenly, very bright white orb shows up next to it, out of nowhere. In more detail, I had come at about 10:30 p.m. Saturday, January 13th. I looked around and saw an orange orb hovering over South Medford. At first, there was an orange orb. I knew it was alien because I had never seen a light there before. Suddenly, a very bright white light orb shows up next to it out of nowhere, and just as quickly as the white light is gone, but the orange orb is still there. I watched it for 15 minutes, waiting for it to leave, then went inside. Well, I guess they got bored. Like, you're just going to see that again? No! Boy. Alrighty. The next UFO sighting. A black triangle sighting in Crescent City, California. Eh? Huh? This happened January 14th, 2018. In brief, the witness states, observed one coming over horizon, followed by three more, then ascend, then more coming over horizon, then ascend. Also, several more, same but in different areas. See pics. In more detail, I was sitting in my dining room. It was dark outside. My cousin was at the kitchen sink. I looked up towards. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Californians, everything sounds like a question. At the end, they raise their voice. You know, that's okay. I'll quit. My cousin was at the kitchen sink. I looked up towards him to ask him a question. I noticed a bright reddish orange light in the sky out of the kitchen window. I told him, look out the window! What the heck is that? I'm not kidding. I'm reading this. We ran out to the back porch and suddenly several more appeared coming over the mountain range. I ran in, got my camera. We stepped down into the yard and I took pics. More came as the others appeared to ascend. More would follow. If you look closely at the pics, you will see triangular lights and what appears to be a lead craft. No sounds, no trails, nothing that would be like a plane or helicopter. No flare either. I was shocked and somewhat frightened, thinking maybe we were under some kind of attack. Watching them ascend was even more confusing. They ascended and were no longer visible. I hope there is a good explanation for what we saw. I am still shook up 2 hours later. Well, that is something to see. All right. The next UFO sighting happened in Redford Charter Township, Michigan. That's a mouthful. 3 names for a city. I don't know why that's funny. Okay. All right, this is a blast from the UFO past. This occurred March 31st, 2004. In brief, the object I saw was large and hovering at a low altitude, moving slowly as if it was looking for something. Maybe it's lost its mind? I don't know. In 2004, I saw an unknown flying object while standing in front of my home looking up at the moon with a telescope facing northeast in Redford, Michigan. The object I saw was triangular with rounded corners and dim white lights centered in each corner. The object hovered over me. For how long? I don't know. It wasn't until I turned around to go into my home that I noticed the object. It made no sound as it hovered over and slowly began moving southwest over my neighborhood. Moments after the object cleared the horizon, I heard, then watched, 2 fighter jets pursuing the object in the same direction. The object I saw was large and hovering at a low altitude, moving slowly as if it was looking for something. I never shared this story with anyone after my family did not believe what I had witnessed during the time of this incident. For a week later, I watched news channels hoping to hear about others who had seen either the object or fighter jets in the night sky, to no avail. Since this time, I have wondered about what I saw on that night in private. I have also wondered about how long the object was there before I even noticed it. We always look to be validated, don't we? See how people get isolated and how others get to, I don't know, control the information that gets put out there because they are doubtful? If we all shared what we experienced, no matter what the naysayers said, so much more education could be had. I think this happens a lot more often than people realize. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Now to highlight some cool articles that I find all over the web. This one comes from Skyships Over Cashiers, and this is called Could Recently Found Stones Be a Giant's Spearhead? Oh gosh, help me on this pronunciation of this name here. The Natantala National Forest in Jackson County, North Carolina, is a hot spot for unusual sightings and discoveries. Most recently, a man discovered a trove of very large stones that look like they might be ancient spearheads. He found them when he was cleaning a swampy area on his property so his creek would flow better. He was amazed at what he found. Wow, these are cool looking. Photos of some of the stones he found are shown below. Clearly, they are too big and heavy to be useful to a normal-sized human. And he says, I was just throwing rocks on the bank while cleaning out the swampy part of the creek so it would flow better. As the rocks piled up, I noticed they all had similar shapes. Unlike smooth river rocks, which I also found, these had sharp edges and appeared to be tooled. A creek doesn't create straight pointed rocks. It may be they could be ancient spearheads. When I picked up some of them, they weighed like 10 pounds. Yeah, they're big. They're the size of his hand. An old friend of mine, whose mother was a full-blooded Cherokee, claims to have a spiritual connection and reads energy, BJ continued. When she came to visit, she was overwhelmed by the energy and power of the place. She felt people had lived there before the Cherokee. You have to wonder if these might have been giants. Wow, and he stacks them, and they almost fit, like they're like similar size and everything. And then there is an editor's note here. In 2014, we posted an article about a book that had just been published titled The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America by Richard J. Dewhurst. Not only does the author present extensive evidence that giants once lived in America, he accuses the Smithsonian of hiding giant skeletons in its closets. Yeah, actually, I have heard about that people have turned in giant skeletons and what giant skeletons? We don't know what you're speaking of. They just magically disappeared. Once again, limiting our knowledge on our own history. Is it that difficult to rewrite history books? Is it that? Is that the reason? Because they just don't want all that writing? I mean, hey, I'm a writer. I could take on some of it. I mean, there's a lot of writers around. We could tackle it and edit the history books. I mean, things have been edited before. Why not do it again? It doesn't hurt me none to do that, but it hurts us not to know the truth. And the truth shall set you free. Boy, I wish I lived in one of those, not lived, but worked in one of the caverns of the Smithsonian and just shuffled around in there and tripped over things. And oh, look what I uncovered. I bet they have catacombs under there. They just find so many hordes of things that to be discovered. Perhaps a little earthquake may rattle them out and they'll just roll out onto the street or something and we'll just discover it. I mean, a girl can dream, right? Well, anyways, I have to thank you all for listening to UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis. Be sure to check out ufoheadlinenews.com every day. And also tune into my weekly show, The Outlander, every Friday, 8 p.m. Central. And check out my paranormal comic strip, The Outlanders, which is at theoutlanderscomic.com. And everything I mention here can be found on HeidiHollis.com or InceptionRadioNetwork.com. If you experience something out of the ordinary, want some level-headed advice, or if you've seen a UFO and want to share, be sure to write me here on Inception or through my main website, HeidiHollis.com. Remember always to keep an open mind so you can stay informed and inspired.